That's what we're going to talk about today. So we kind of talked about the physical notes together, and then the Northern Europe notes you guys did on your own. You answered some questions about it. But today we're going to talk about Western Europe. So Western Europe is a really interesting place to study and kind of look at in Europe. It's one of the most important, one of the most influential on our country in the United States. So it's very important to kind of take a look at. They have mixed ethnic groups in Western Europe. It's very diverse, very mixed, and it's mainly just mixed of European nations. So the thing that's really different about Europe that I think as Americans we don't really think about is, you know how like if you go to Illinois, it's like 30, 40 minutes away and you're in Illinois. Well, in Europe, it's possible to go 30, 40 minutes away and you're in a different country. They have different language, different ethnicity, different religion, different everything. And so there's a lot of mixture. So, for example, it's not uncommon to have a dad who is from Switzerland, a mom who's from Italy, but you were born in France, right? So that's the combination. So you're like super mixed, right? Your dad's from Switzerland, your mom's from Italy, and you're French. You know, it's very weird. So that's what I mean by mixed ethnic groups. They welcome immigration. They have guest workers. These are foreigners who can work on a temporary basis in a country other than their own. So this is very common in Europe. You know, you can get a work visa. You could be from Italy and get a visa to work in Germany, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very popular and actually quite common for people to live in one country but work in a different country. And they have large populations near cities. And some of the cities we're going to talk about today are very big, popular cities that are very old and historic, and you've definitely heard of them before. Okay, so like Paris, France. Okay, Paris is a city that everybody's heard of. It's in France. It's the capital. It's the cultural center of Europe. It's known as the city of light, the city of romance, city of art. So you have like the Eiffel Tower over here. This is the Louvre, probably the most famous art museum in the world. It's got like, you know, a lot of Leonardo da Vinci's work, Van Gogh's work, Picasso's, like some of the masterpieces that have ever been created are at the Louvre, which is very cool. But yeah, Paris is a cultural center, very, very important. Okay, Brussels, this is in Belgium, and it's known as the city of industry and science. And so they have something there called the Super Collider, where it's a scientific, you know, machine. And essentially what they do is they put atoms and split atoms into smaller particles in this super collider, and they collide those to create new elements. So it's kind of like a startup, very technologically advanced city. The way I kind of think of it is it's kind of like Europe's version of Silicon Valley. So you know how like all like Google and Facebook and Instagram, like all their headquarters in California. That's kind of what Brussels is for Europe. It's kind of like their California as far as their technology and apps, startups, stuff like that. Okay, Amsterdam. This is in the Netherlands. It does not have streets. It has canals. So instead of having paved roads, they have canals made of water. You go down them in these small boat taxis or these gondolas. It's known for its history and it's very liberal. Amsterdam is known for being a very forward-thinking place. They have laws in Amsterdam that no one else in the world really has. And the laws that they have are very interesting. I'll give you an example of one because I don't want to spend too much time on it. But in Amsterdam, they have something that's called blue light and red light districts. And if you're in a red light district, then it means that certain things are prohibited. For example, like marijuana and other drugs and paraphernalia are prohibited. You cannot do them. It's illegal. It's not allowed. But if you're in a blue light district, you can do them. You're allowed to, you know, partake in marijuana or other drugs. Not just marijuana, but I mean like any other drugs. You can do them, but you have to do them at a clinic or whatever. And they have nurses that, you know, they administer the drugs to you. And I'll like, for example, like it could be like heroin. You could be addicted to heroin. You go to this clinic, you sign up, they call your name, they call you back to the waiting room. A doctor looks at you. He comes in, they inject you with your dosage of heroin. They let you go on your trip. They have you hooked up on heart rate monitors. They're making sure that you don't overdose. And then when you come down, you stay there overnight. When you come down, they treat you, you leave, and when you want to do it again, you come back. And each time that you come back, they have kept record of how much heroin they've been giving you, and they wean you off of it. So each time you come and you go for your daily dose, they give you less and less and less and less and less, and then they put you in treatment, and then they help you recover. which is very interesting because a lot of places, if you just do it and you get caught, you go straight to jail. You don't receive any treatment or help. But in Amsterdam, they don't do that. They have a treatment plan. It's very revisionist, very remedial, which is very cool, very interesting. Okay, moving on. I said I didn't want to spend too much time on it, and then I spent too much time on it. So the history, the Roman Empire, Rome's empire was vast. It was very big. It stretched through most of Europe, parts of Asia, parts of Northern Africa. They controlled what the territory of Europe was through dictatorship. Caesar acquires most of all the land in Europe. Eventually, Rome becomes too big. It becomes too big, and they fall to invasions. You had the Visigoths and the Franks, Germans and French, invade Rome, collapse it, and when Rome fell, this leads to the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages are known as the Dark Ages because there's a period of time where there's no written history and things are unclear. The Franks established feudalism. The Franks are the French, and the Franks established feudalism. Charlemagne is the king of Western Europe, and Charlemagne was known for being a very important king. He was very powerful. He was a great military leader, but he was a great political leader. And he wanted people to be educated. He knew how to read and write, and he wanted other people to be able to read and write. So he had a very big focus on education, and he had a focus on security and military. So he was very powerful. And then ultimately what happens is at this time, Catholicism is starting to become unpopular. And Charlemagne was very popular. And so the Catholic Church was like, hey, you know what? What if we bring the Roman Empire back and we make Charlemagne the emperor, who everybody likes? We can bring back Catholicism in Rome and make Rome powerful again. So they create the Holy Roman Empire, and this unites all of Western Europe because during that time, you had France and Germany and all these different countries, they were fighting one another. And the Catholic Church was like, we need to quit fighting one another and we need to unite together so we can fight the Muslims who are invading Eastern Europe. So Charlemagne unites everybody, the Pope backs Charlemagne, and they start fighting what we call the Crusades, which were a holy war against the Muslims. And so the idea was they wanted to go and recapture Palestine, which is, we'll talk about it in Geography B, but Palestine is a strip of land right on the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and it's where modern-day Israel is at. And the Crusades, there were 7 of them, and they were fought to win back that piece of territory from the Muslims. If you remember, Christianity, its birthplace was in Bethlehem in Jerusalem. So it's where Christianity was born, and the Christian kingdoms of Europe wanted to control where their main religion was created at. But it had been taken over by Muslims, so they fought 7 wars, and those wars lasted over 200 years. And they weren't very popular. The idea behind the Crusades was the church was like, hey, listen, if you sign up to go and fight in the Crusades, if you die, you instantly go to heaven because you're fighting for God. So I don't care if you've killed people before, if you're a murderer or a rapist or a thief, or if you're just a horrible, immoral person. If you sign up to fight in the Crusades and you die, you go to heaven. And so a lot of people saw that as an opportunity to make things right, and they signed up and they went and fought. Okay, the Renaissance. This was a period of time in Europe where there's this interest in arts and education. The Renaissance kind of stands for the rebirth of learning. And so people become interested in how to make art more realistic. Before, art was kind of not realistic. Then they started figuring out how to paint people like this and make statues that were like this, where they look human-like. Okay? And they did that through understanding anatomy and science. World War I and World War II, this caused economic depression. As you can imagine, when you have the entire world at war, it's going to be a very bad thing for the world economies. Most of Western Europe was destroyed because that's where World War II was fought at, was in Germany and France and Belgium and those places. And ultimately what ends up happening is, and you'll learn more about this in U.S. history, I think it's ridiculous that I have to explain World War I and II in one slide. But I mean, what it boils down to is you had nationalism happening in Germany. They thought they were better than everyone else. They thought anyone who's not German was garbage or trash. They said those people are murderers or whatever. The Jews, they're murderers, they're rapists, they're thieves, they're ripping us off, they're the reason our economy is bad, et cetera, et cetera. And the German people ate it up. They were like, yeah, yeah. Like, they were so supportive of it. And what it led to is just blind faith in an extremely evil leader named Adolf Hitler. And so ultimately, what happens is they end up losing World War I and World War II. But during World War II, they had something going on called the Holocaust. And the Holocaust was the systematic killing of Jews, the ethnic group of Jews. And so the idea was there was 11 million Jews in the world during World War II. 6 million of the 11 million were killed on purpose with the idea of completely getting rid of the Jewish population, just kind of like treating them like they were bugs that you would exterminate with bug spray and you just kill all of them. Then you don't have an ant problem because you kill them all. That's kind of what the Holocaust was. And it's one of the worst things that has ever happened in human history. And to be completely honest with you guys, the Holocaust is the reason that I'm a history teacher. I remember learning about the Holocaust for the first time and it just like blew my mind. And after that, I just like started reading about history, and it's what got me hooked was learning about the Holocaust. Because it's very important that we learn from our past mistakes, so that way we don't ever repeat them. And yeah, okay, culture, so the arts, you have realism and impressionism. This is realism. It's supposed to look like a photograph from a distance. This is impressionism. This is supposed to look like lily pads on a pond or a lake. It looks like that, but it doesn't look like a photo. It kind of implies what the subject matter is. Education and healthcare, they have a 99% literacy rate, mandatory schooling, compulsory healthcare. So they have very good healthcare systems where most of it is provided for by the government through taxes. Their education systems are really good, quite a bit different than ours. They do school a lot different than we do, but it is a very, very good education system. And like people would ask, like, what are the differences? Like, what do they do different? One of the things that they do different is they don't do standardized tests. Like ISTEP and NWEA tests and all those tests. They don't do that. The other thing that they do is when you get to like your sophomore year of school, they have you take this big test. And it's not a standardized test, but it's like an exam that the school does, and it tells you like what type of learner you are and what type of content you're good at learning about. And then your junior and senior year, they focus on what you're good at. Where here in the States, we just kind of like want to get you finished. We'll just get you graduated. You can figure out what you want to do when you get to college. In Europe, they figure that out when you're like 16. So like if you're really good at math and you like computers, and they say, hey, you're going to do computer engineering, and then your junior and senior year, you're taking like some college classes and some high school classes at the same time, but it all deals with computer engineering. So then by the time you're 20, you're almost done with college, and so you can really start working in a career at a younger age. We're here in the United States, a lot of people don't even start college until they're in their 20s. So family life and leisure. So they have a really high standard of living in Europe. Here in the United States, if you work full time, you're working 40 hours plus a week. In Europe, if you're working full time, you're working 30 hours a week, which is a whole nother day off. So imagine you only work 4 days a week, but you make the same amount of money you would make here in the United States. That's what a lot of people in Europe have going on. So there's a high standard of living. There's a decline in birth rate, and the population is aging. Pretty much what it boils down to is younger people are not having kids. People in their 20s, they're not having kids as much as people in their 40s or 30s were when they were 20. And so the population is kind of declining. Soccer is the most popular sport in Europe, and they have shorter work weeks and more leisure time, more off time. Like the idea of like having time off is very important in Europe. Here in the United States, if you have a job and you call into work and you're like, hey, you know what, like it's pretty nice out today, like the weather's good, and I don't feel like working today. I just want to relax or whatever. So I'm gonna call off because I just want to chill. Your boss is gonna be like, get in here. You don't just call off because it's nice outside and blah blah blah. In Europe, it's like, wow, you know what? The weather's really nice today. I'm a business owner. I'm going to close my business today. I'm going to put a sign out that tells everyone to just enjoy the weather. I'm going to call all my employees and tell them not to come in today. I want them to have some off time. It's just a very different way of thinking. And this is the Roman Empire, what it looked like at its height. So you can see this is Europe right here. This is Western Europe right here. And the Roman Empire started here and it expanded all throughout Western Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. So the Roman Empire was huge. And then these photos on this slide are graphic, but I'm going to show you them. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. But these are some photos from the Holocaust. So the Germans would round up Jews, put them on train cars like they were cattle. They would pack them in the train cars so tight that they were just smashed together. Like they didn't even have shoulder to shoulder. They were just smashed in there. They would take them to these concentration camps where they pretty much kept them in a prison. And they would force them to do hard labor. And when they didn't need them anymore, they would kill them. And the way they would kill them was by having them dig mass graves, and then telling them that they smelled from working, they needed to take a shower. They would take them to the showers, and this would be the showers, but when they would get them in there, they would lock this door, it sealed it off, and there was no shower in here. They had these pipes that would spray in a poisonous gas. They would gas them, and they would kill them. And then they would take all of them, throw them in this mass grave, throw dirt over the top, and just pack it as full as they could. The other thing that they would do is they would starve them to death. They would not feed them. So like this guy right here, he probably weighs like 50 pounds. He's a grown man. He's an adult man. He weighs like 50 pounds. You can see his ribs. You see his bones. And this is malnourishment. I mean, if you don't eat long enough, you'll die. And so that's what would happen. And these are some bodies of people who were starved to death. Like there were people and they were living looking like this. They were alive and then they died. And they just stack them up. They bury them in these mass graves. And all these people were Jewish. And they would take the men and the women and children and they'd separate them. So they'd put men in one place, women in one place, kids in one place, and they would kill all of them. And it's estimated about 7.4 million Jews were killed from 1939 to 1946. So in a 7-year period, they killed about 1 million Jews a year. And this is known as the Holocaust. It's one of the most graphic, violent, evil, horrible events that's ever taken place in human history. And it's one that, as a historian, it's one that we have to learn about because this is horrible. We did this to other people. It's inexcusable, evil, and immoral. And this is what makes history really important, is we have to learn about this. So that way, when we recognize behavior and activity from our leaders that looks like it could go this way, we don't do it. We stop it. We find a way to stop it. We do what's right. And so this is why learning about the Holocaust is so important. Okay, so thanks for watching the video. Bye.